wait to see you all here. We have a rich day in store for you. I'm going to speak briefly. A few other people will speak briefly. We'll have a few slides, and we'll have some small groups who will hear intimately from people who were at the dialogue in South Carolina what that was like. So for those who don't know me, there must be some such people in the room, but probably not too many. I'm Paula Green, and I am the co-conspirator of this dialogue project with a woman named Deborah Snow, who's not here today, but we're working on this together. And we have a group of 18 people from Western Mass, spreading from Springfield to Shelburne Falls, who are either of European descent, African descent, or indigenous descent, who are all part of the dialogue group. And we are teamed with a group from Beaufort County, South Carolina, and a few people also from Eastern Kentucky, because they were part of our last project, Hands Across the Hills. So we are a 3-state interracial group attempting to dialogue together, learn about each other, and see what we can contribute to dismantling racism in this country. And you'll hear quite a bit of that as the day goes on. I'm the founder of Karuna Center for Peace Building, an Amherst-based NGO working in war-torn and war-recovering countries in dialogue, and also a professor there in the School for International Training, where I've been training the next generation of peace builders to take this over, and they're doing that, which is great. We have media here today. BBC is here, which is wonderful, and the BBC women are back there, Hannah and Chelsea. And probably most of you know that there was an article about Hands Across the Hills in the New York Times a few weeks ago, and BBC discovered us probably through that, and this is the way things spread. There's also Amherst Media will be filming. And a reporter is here from The Advocate. So we have well covered locally. When you're in the group, or even when you're here, if there's a camera on you and you don't want it, just put up your hands and they will respect your privacy not to be filmed, but I don't think that'll be too big a problem in this group. We hope that BBC will come back in June. What this program is it's we started doing dialogue 6 months ago, the Western Mass group, and then we had our meeting with our South Carolina and Kentucky people. And then in June, everybody will be here. So the weekend of June 28th to 30th, you can hold that in your minds for now. There'll be a 3-day dialogue with all the people. It's about 30 of us all together. And in that time, there'll be some public events that you can meet our counterparts from South Carolina and Kentucky and learn their experience in this. We are committed to going on beyond June, but what form that will take is a mystery right now. It'll evolve as it goes on. We want the media here because this is, in the end, an educational project, and our goal is to spread the idea that we need to talk to each other. And I think we're all very aware of the toxicity of the election season coming upon us, and all the more reason that we understand who our fellow Americans are, no matter what their background, what their geography, what their history, and that we begin to bond with each other so that we're not as divided as we've become. It's become dangerous. It's what I saw in war countries overseas, was this dehumanization. And our work to do this now is to prevent that kind of tragedy from evolving here. So Shabazz is going to tell us a little bit about the dialogue itself, what he thinks the focus is and the potential of having this 3-way dialogue. And then Sue is going to read a letter from the founder, Deborah Snow, who's away. And then we'll also introduce all the members of the Bridge for Unity group. We'll show you some pictures from our Kentucky experience, and then we'll break into groups. So Shabazz, you're on.
Thank you, Rose. Everything we do is with a cultural and a spiritual foundation. And so I pass the mic.
Thank you.
Since 1991, I've been a student of the Yoruba spiritual tradition, which has its extensions in the Americas called Candomblé in Brazil and the Lukumi tradition in Cuba. In 1997, I was initiated into the priesthood, which gives me the, I guess, authority to be able to offer you this prayer. The Yoruba people and all its extensions is a monotheistic spiritual tradition. They believe in the oneness of truth, that which is immeasurable, it is invisible, that which is unknown, that which we cannot know. They call that Olodumare. But Olodumare has a consciousness, there's a divine consciousness of Olodumare, which is called Olofi. And then we get to see all the manifest world as a result of Olofi and Olodumare, and that's called Oloru. So I will begin with a few praise names of Olodumare. The Yoruba and all its extension begin, as Shabazz said, with giving praise. So, Iba Olodumare, Oba Jiki, I respect the Creator, the Chief, who we praise first. Iba Olodumare, I respect the messenger of creation, the Chief, who is the first to manifest. I respect the Creator of the medicine that covers the earth. I respect the Spirit of final days, the Chief of deciding the time of death. I respect the Chief of the seasons of the earth. I respect the web of life, that which supports all existence and the earth. I respect the heavens of the mountains. I respect the heavens of the river. I respect all things that live on earth. I respect all things that live in heaven. I respect the ancient machinery of the mystery of the white cloth. I respect those who weave the ancient mysteries of abundance on the map. I respect those who greet the mysteries of creation. I respect the power of land to spread across the surface of the earth. And finally, Iba Afefu, Lailayawo, Isalu, Olutoto Mojubae, I respect that place beyond time that is the true mystery of heaven, and I will forever give thanks. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe.
Thank you, Rose. Susan Rice from the UU Dismantling Racism Supremacy Task Force. Susan was going to say a few words on behalf, not true?
No, but
Okay. That was done. And we have a very brief song. Where's Sarah?
Tim and Susan.
This song was given to us by our good friend and mentor, Dr. Vincent Harding. He came to Amherst several times. He was at the Peace Pagoda, but these words were put to the tune of "We're Climbing Jacob's Ladder." He usually waited until the end, but we're so packed, we just can't wait to share.
We are building our new world. We are building our new world. We are building our new world. Builders
Okay. Well, the place we're gonna, that we've just returned from, is it's a very historic place for us to really achieve the tri-state kind of gathering that we came together back in September planning for. Of course, we did a lot of internal work just through our meetings, but then we were always having our mind in January going down to South Carolina. A colleague of mine has a little book, came out a year or so ago called Penn Center, A History Preserved. Orville Burton is my friend. And one of the things he points out is that it was started by two women that came from down north to this area that had been liberated from the Confederacy and began to set up an educational institution for the young children in that area who had been denied an education. And it lasted for many years, but as pointed out here, part of the idea of the school was that it would make Euro-Americans out of these little Gullah Geechee African children. It did not like the Gullah Geechee language they spoke, this creolized language they spoke. It tried to beat it out of them, and really worked to eliminate the whole Gullah culture. But they weren't successful, and moving under new leadership later, after the school was even closed, it turned into its opposite, and it began to really uphold and has worked now today to works within the Gullah community to preserve the Gullah culture of the Low Country in South Carolina. And likewise, under one of its executive directors, it became a retreat facility that was used by the civil rights movement in the 1960s. And the book is lavishly illustrated with photos of Martin Luther King. He's up there just as we were just up there singing. You don't get to see Dr. King singing a lot, but when he'd go to the very building we were in the Penn Center, he just enjoyed singing. Joan Baez came there. He'd sing with Joan Baez, Andy Young, Ralph Abernathy, Stokely. I mean, it's a whole, Fred Shuttleworth, it's a whole who's who of people that gathered down there under the former executive, at the invitation of the former executive director, Emory Campbell. So the space was imbued with all of that kind of history. But we brought, I think, a new history to it, and it was founded on a very simple proposition that by reaching out, turning to each other instead of against each other, can be the start of something important. And what we hope in gathering here today is, through our others who participated, to share a little bit about that reaching out and that reaching in and what transformations have begun from it. So with that, I turn the girl over to the next one.
Great. So we want to introduce all the people who are in Bridge for Unity. You'll recognize us by our badges, but Stephen and Carla are going to introduce everyone.
Harris right there.
What up? Do you want to do that or just talk loud? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Ani Buju, Wabachi Nishnikas, Jaganasi Dunoswan Karanai, Nishnabekwe, Wagan Casino Dawakwe. My name is Karanai. This is my mom. She did not come with us, but I want to introduce her since I wouldn't be here if not for her. I live in Holyoke. We are Odawa. which is an Anishinaabe band, the Little Traverse Bay Band from Petoskey, Michigan. And there were 18 of us that went down to South Carolina, many of whom are here, some of whom are not. So if you did go on that trip, if you could stand and just say your name, what town you live in, and anything else you need to share. Yeah.
Tom Wiener from Northampton, and it was one of the great experiences of my life.
Naftali Duran, I live in Holyoke, I went with this group.
I'm Sue Brown, and I live in Southwick, and do a lot of things in the valley.
I'm Rose Sackey Milligan, and I live just south of here, 25 minutes in Indian Orchard.
I'm Sarah Purnell. I live in Shelburne Falls.
LaMarche Shabazz, teach over at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, the Du Bois Department of Afro-American Studies, and I live in South Amherst.
Tim Bullock, Western Mass.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Trevor Baptiste. I was fortunate enough to go on this trip. I like to travel as well. I live in the woods of Pelham, Massachusetts.
I'm Demetria Shabazz, and I live in Amherst. And I'm the president of the board of directors of Amherst Media.
Stephen Botkin, I live in the woods with Trevor, and in Pelham.
I was not able to make it down to South Carolina, but I'm part of this team. And I live in Northampton at this time. And my name is James Arana.
Okay, and everybody? What? Yes, and there are seats for anybody. There's one seat here and one here. Please come in and find seats. There are several seats. Raise your hand if you have a seat next to you. Plenty, several seats. Keep your hands up. Follow the hands. Follow the hands. Hands are up for seats. Keep following. More hands are up. Okay. So that's the people who are here, and then there are 6 people who are not here who are also part of our group. So Tim and Sue are going to tell us about the agenda for the day. Tim and Sue.
Where are we in this?
Right there.
So, we're going to have, after, I'm going to actually introduce Deb Snow with a statement that I've got from her in just a second. And then after that, we'll talk about why we need the Bridge for Unity group and what our future vision is. We'll have the slideshow that Shabazz has been talking to you about, and Gloria and or Paula, and then we'll talk about the photo journey that's in that slideshow. We will break into some small groups with a couple of the members of Bridge for Unity, grouped up with 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 of you folks, and go to the other hall and sit in some small, more intimate circles during which you can ask some questions, and you'll get some further instructions about that part, and as we move through this to the end of the slideshow. And then we'll be coming back to share some of the experiences we had in those small groups.
Great.
Okay?
And there's wonderful refreshments in the other room.
I'm going to do the thing from Deb at this point. So, because she's not able to be here, I'm going to speak for her. My draw to both the group that I'm going to explain about and the group that went down to South Carolina is this saying that I ran across a long time ago in my life, and it's run my life from that point on. No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin, or his background, or his religion. People must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. And that's from Nelson Mandela.
This statement is simply a statement about the origins of the Bridge for Unity that comes to us from Deb Snow, who's on vacation right now. So she says, 2.5 years ago, after the 2016 election, I formed a group with 5 others called Seniors for a Democratic Society. S4DS is how we go. That was a play on the name of for the leftist radical group that was in the 60s, Students for a Democratic Society. And we 6 all grew up, and now we are seniors. And S4DS has begun to work on issues locally, but we also wanted to find folks in a red state and begin working politically with them. And because of her niece, actually I'm going to say my niece, but it's not my niece, it's Deb, so you have to think of me as Deb. Her niece Laura was also an activist, and she lived in Beaufort, South Carolina. So we thought that that might be a good place for us to start. While traveling to Beaufort, South Carolina to visit my niece, Barbara and I met Sonia Griffin Evans, a Gullah artist and a storyteller and also an activist. Sonia later traveled to our restaurant, The Blue Heron, with her artwork, a singer, and a pianist. There she presented an incredible art performance, and it was from our work together that the work of S4DS became the vision for Bridge for Unity, and it was conceived at that point. Bridge for Unity is a grassroots organization devoted to interracial and intercultural dialogues. We believe that it is unacceptable to allow the divisions of racism and white privilege to control our narratives and our communities. We are committed to connecting people by breaking down these barriers of mistrust and fear. Our project is committed to confronting racism and white privilege by facilitating and participating in interracial and dialogues that promote community healing. We believe that through respectful dialogue and communication, we will establish common ground, create unified communities, empower people to speak truth to power, and commit to the basic values of democracy that are fairness and justice for all. Soon after Barbara and I became aware of Hands Across the Hills, led by Paula Green, we participated in a dialogue training workshop with Paula, and we asked her to co-direct this project with me and to facilitate with Dr. Gloria Graves Holmes, who is from South Carolina. Paula agreed, and Bridge for Unity was born and off. And now our group is here this afternoon to discuss our first dialogue sessions that happened at the beginning of this year in South Carolina. Paula.
So now what's going to happen is Sarah and Shabazz are going to take just a few minutes to talk to you about why we need this organization, why we need thousands of organizations just like this one, and what we hope for our future vision.
I want to start by saying how very meaningful it is for us to be in this circle with all of you, because we want to recognize that each of you is a community builder. Each of you is involved in racial justice. So we start by acknowledging you, as well as sharing our excitement about the particular contribution that we want to make to our common cause. Now here's the crux. If you're going to start working on racial reconciliation, how is it not fake? How is it like not just pretend, just thrown together? So when we began in October, people, we all had our own kinds of questions. They included, will someone really understand my story? The lies that I see, do other people here see them? Will anyone have my back? Are other people as outraged as I am? So if you imagine us coming together month by month, beginning in October, and then it culminated in going together to South Carolina. And for every one of us, at one point there might be like, am I really part of this? Can I give part of this? And then what we found was we were making a circle that was a place, there's this really interesting combination of unconditional regard and respect, but also passionate truth-telling. So we were like walking, and Ruby Sales talks about step on the path to the beloved community. Every day, make a step. And so there was that kind of a feeling of, okay, I belong here, you belong here. We want to hear each other's stories. Let me give you an example of one of the questions that we had in our small groups. So we talked about, what are your memories of experiencing solidarity and support across racial lines, or of wanting it to be there when it should have been there but it wasn't there? So questions like this really open things up. Shabazz talks about part of our purpose is fortitude, that we're fortifying each other. So I was thinking about a beautiful phrase that Lisa Brooks, who is a professor here at Amherst College, she's Abenaki, she's a scholar. She talks about kinship, that we are beloved kin to each other. So Bridge for Unity was about becoming kin and also taking on the responsibilities that go with it. So one of the responsibilities is where I step, my ancestors being colonizers, how do I keep remembering this as native land? So we kept, looking at what are our responsibilities to each other. So our vision is that we really feel like we are in a growing circle where we're keeping our commitment and we're in this long, long generations of people, unbroken, people who worked against oppression, making a world that can work. So we come to you today with that feeling we're in this common cause. We thank you very much for being here.
And added to that, many things have been discussed, especially when we were in South Carolina, how we might develop a curriculum that can be shared in our universities, in our schools, in our communities. How to take these techniques of which we have so much wonderful expertise, starting with Paula Green and her legacy of peace-building work around the world. Others, as I've said on the radio show recently, colleagues like Demetria here, next to me here, and Leda Cooks and Linda Trop, and so many others that have worked with these, Jimena Zuniga, with these processes of dialogues. How can we take this? How can we develop it, get it out there in that old language from the Civil War times into a new birth of freedom? We need a new birth of freedom, and so in some small way, if we can be a part of that, if we can be a spark, if we can help to get the idea out of, again, people coming together and turning to each other rather than on each other, then that's part of our hope for the future.
This afternoon, before we gathered, BBC interviewed me for a few minutes, and they said, "What's your hope for the day?" And I said, my hope is that people will come and become part of a support community for us. We're too small to be alone. There's 18 of us here, and there's now 100 or more in the room, and we hope you'll be a part of our support community and come to our events and support us in any way you can. We'll have more events before June, and then the big one in June when the other groups are with us, because we're all in this together, and we live in this valley where so much more can be done and is being done to deal with the inbuilt racism. When we were in South Carolina, we were challenged by a woman who said that she was colorblind, and we all took a big gasp. And she was not part of our group; she was a guest. And then one of the women said, "Racism is the water we swim in and the air we breathe, and we're not even conscious of it." So part of what we're doing is trying to become conscious of it. And we want that to be everyone who's in this circle, that you're part of this journey with us, part of this consciousness raising. And we're able to identify a little bit of this air and water that we swim and breathe in together. So thank you for being here and being part of us. We have a 10-minute show now, a little slideshow. This is about our experience in South Carolina. It's light and lively and wonderful. And Dee and Neftali are going to talk us through this as we do it.
Hello again. So this is unrehearsed, so we're going to hope for the best. First, I'd like to share a short slideshow of some of the photos, and you'll get a sense of the place that Shabazz described and Paula and Sarah have been talking about. That's about 2 minutes. And then Nepali is going to introduce a video interview that he did on the grounds of the Penn Center, and we'll see a little clip of that. And then you'll be introduced to some of our South Carolina participants through the 4-minute video, and you can get a sense also of why they were participating. So here we go. Steve Bodkin did this.
Writing's not accuracy, but Grammarly can help.
So sorry. I can start. Yeah, why don't you start and then now I'll go here, I'll get it while you're.
Yeah. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Yes, so, as I said before, I live in Holyoke. I've been living in Western Massachusetts since 2003, but I'm originally from southern Mexico, from the state of Oaxaca, from the Mixteco region, the Mixteco community, otherwise known as the Ñusadí community, indigenous community. And I work with food. I came to the U.S. as an undocumented migrant worker, and I've been working in kitchens and with food ever since. So I use food. My life's work is really the intersection of food, anti-racism work, and hunger issues, food access. So being part of this group, traveling to the South, it was the first time I've experienced being on the grounds of a plantation in this sense. So being down there really made me think about, because I think about food a lot. So I try to rationalize issues through food. So being on the grounds of this plantation really made me think about what people were eating, how well they were eating or not eating. Really the foundation of what we call now New American food, based on slavery and based on scarcity for black people in the South. And meeting Wayne Johnson from Kentucky, and the first connection that we had was talking about food. Wayne and I probably would never meet in any other circumstances, but it was really beautiful to connect around food. So at the end of our time together, I wanted to have a conversation, to continue a conversation that went on for a few days about food scarcity, cultural appropriation, culinary appropriation, and the fact that all of our communities, one of the similarities that we have is that we care deeply about food. And for me, there are two things that we lose before we lose our identity as communities, our people. One of them is food, and the other one is language. So they agreed to do a little video. So I'm gonna play a little bit of that, but it's on the Bridge for Unity Facebook page, so you all can go watch it.
Hi, thank you for joining me. I'm really grateful you were able to do this. My name is Nathalie Duran, and this is the first time 3 days ago I didn't know both of you. As I was telling you, I come from the state of Oaxaca, Mexico, and I love food, and I've been working with indigenous foodways for the last 2 years. And thanks for being connected.
Yes.
And you are?
I'm Joanne Johnson. I consider myself a hillbilly woman, and I love food too. So when I started talking to Nev, we had all kinds of things in common.
And I'm Sonia Griffin Evans, and I am from Sarah, actually a little country, Gulf country. And I just, as you said, it doesn't happen this weekend, but I felt this kindred spirit, and we started talking basically on, I think, the same kind of trials and tribulations and things that affect us as, indigenous people to the earth, I'll say that. Me being from the Gulf culture, which, that culture derived from our ancestors being brought here, because we were isolated on islands, we was able to maintain more of our African culture.
This was my first time south of North Carolina.
So I'm gonna stop it there. You all can go watch it online, and I'll pass it on to people.
Thank you, Charlie. So this next one is really just to give you an idea of some of the issues that we talked about and some of the people's kind of quick impressions of the dialogue, and it introduces you to some of our South Carolina participants.
My name is Gloria Holmes. I'm presently a resident of Beaufort County. I am a native New Yorker, however.
My name is Kimberly Williams, and I'm from East Kentucky.
My name is Gwen Johnson, and I'm from Hemphill, Kentucky. I became a part of the Hanson Hills group back when we received a letter from them. And they were reaching out for somebody to tell them basically why they voted for Trump. And our county went about 80% for Trump, and the town of Leverett went about 82% for Hillary. so there was that difference.
I'm Gina Williams. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. 7 years ago, I moved to Somerville, South Carolina, just outside of Charleston. And it was a bit of a culture shock. But by and large, because I'm an older person, I did not have to deal with racism per se. I was mindful of the fact that had I been there raising children, that it would have been a real difficult situation.
I'm here and learn something new, stretch myself, get uncomfortable, explore, and something amazing happen. And what has happened so far is just awe of the people who are in this room. I mean, every little stories have been so poignant. So what I hope will come out of this is a kind of model that other small groups can practice, and maybe in another couple of years we can actually collectively come up with a curriculum or a step-by-step for almost any kind of.
You know, you could have somebody's character. We as the grown-ups, we have to set an example for the young people, for our children, our grandchildren coming up in this world, because they are the future. And we want them to know that, hey, we paved this way for you guys. You guys have the opportunity to take the bull by the horn and run with it.
I'm glad that I got the opportunity to come here because I've been able to meet people that I would probably never met otherwise. And we've had some great conversations, and everyone's been able to be open and share their true feelings in a safe space without being judged, but we're being understood more importantly by each other. And personally, I just believe we all have more in common than we have differences.
We have to fight for what's right. The wrongness just got to go. Our children, our grandchildren, and children to come need a safe place. Because right now, there isn't. There's too much pain, anger, and hatred. And we just need to start paving just that way for them. Because if we don't, who will?
I want South Carolina to be a part. I want people to be a part. And so this has been such an awesome experience because it allows us to get past what I call just the surface and not just address the symptoms, but to address the problems, you know, to the root of the problems and how and where do we go from here.
So hopefully that gives you an idea of what we were doing there, and you can see the beautiful people that we got to interact with. Don't pay attention to that. And you can hear that there was a lot of dialogue going on, a lot of talking, a lot of connecting. So thank you.
So the heart of what we want to do with you this afternoon is to give you a chance to be up close to one or two of our dialogue participants. And we're going to do that now. We're going to, in a few minutes, make magic and get you all into small groups, believe it or not. And we're going to do it really quickly so we can use most of our time in those small groups. After the small groups, we'll come back and we'll have a Q&A for everybody.
What have you done looking into your own heritage and ancestry?
To be in that energy of people working on trying to change the racial dynamics, not only here in our own community, but in other places too. So we arrived in, we actually arrived in.
The It's a great question. The way that I determine that a group is ready to do work is by not running away the way you do about your own cultural experience. You know, just probing deep questions that we got to ask of the other race that we don't have conversations like.
Was a lot of our personal stories. What's a time you had a close friend who was a different race than you, and how did that go? Or what's the first time you remember experiencing racism firsthand or witnessing it?
Sometimes I'm going to touch and feel, sometimes I'm real practical. I value movement, but I don't.
One that the teaching comes in and the exhaustion and awareness that comes from having to explain this over and over, generation after generation. And so I manage.
This situation is really hopeless. You're asking one of my areas of study is history, so I'm very immersed in the history, and yes, I've seen where we've come a long way in some areas.
Right, like there's something about like remaining positive, right? Like there's some elder views that I think of, like I don't think of that as respectful. I think of that as remaining, right? Like staying in your place. I think, and I think there's some intergenerational concepts there that don't transfer.
People of color, and yet it's like, how do we do that without exhausting people of color? We feel like, oh man, we've had to deal with the impact of racism all our lives every day, and now we have to educate you, and yes, we need the education.
Something that can provide a fresh kind of discourse from what we had back in January. In terms of how
because we internalize it. If there's a way that we can think of personal as just another form of learning, another form of practice, I think that eases some of the self-focused concerns and kind of opens us up to just focusing on what we're doing.
That, of course, came up. It's like, we were so tired. I remember I was asked to speak.
This bridge leads to unity, never turning back, never turning back. Gonna ask Paula questions.
Okay, so this is now open question time, and it's not just for me because there are about 10 of us from the group in the room. But I'm going to pass the mic around because there's a big room to start with my very old friend.
So, as Paul said, we're all friends. Marie and I are from Brattleboro. Paula and I'm such an admirer, but I also had the occasion to be among the officiants at her wedding. With Jimmy. So we're from Brattleboro. We're part of a group that got the town of Brattleboro to join the Karen Armstrong and Dalai Lama's Charter for Compassion, which is 70 cities and towns around the world. And one of the things and we have a group that's working on it, members of the select board, activist organizations. And one of the things that we're really interested in, based on your experience, is a listening project like yours. We've talked about it, and there's a feeling, before we go to Kentucky or South Carolina, we got a lot of diversity within our town. Let's start that way. And so we found some people that are willing to do it on both sides, and it looks like it's going to happen. So, two questions. The first is, would you lovely people be willing to adopt us as like a little brother or little sister and allow us to use your name and just consider us an offspring? And the second question is, in a situation like that, where you've got on the one side people this may not be all about race, but it might be about guns, it might be about the role of government and so forth. The people that tend to be on the right-wing side in towns like Brattleboro tend to be lower income, less educational opportunity and so forth. How do you get over that in making a really good dialogue?
Wonderful questions. Yes to adoption. We believe in adoption. And I'll be happy to talk to you and anybody else about that. We want this idea to spread. We hope that you will start dialogues on whatever difference exists in your community that you want to focus on. And it doesn't have to be a great big 3-day marathon. These can be, especially in your own community, once a month, you know, on a Sunday afternoon or whatever it is, a few hours of meeting time together. What we learned with our colleagues from Kentucky, because there was not just political difference, there was tremendous class difference, opportunity difference of all sorts, was to be honest about it, Jimmy, to really talk about what those differences are. And it's very hard to talk about class. So I sort of like talking about race, you know, we don't want to talk about these things. We want to pretend that we're all in the middle class and we all have equal opportunity and all the rest of those stories. And it's important to acknowledge that these differences exist so that people can then speak from their own experience about what does it feel like. And we also tried in our own community, we didn't expect to have a Kentucky partnership. We looked for a partnership someplace in Western Mass. But it was just after the election, and it was very difficult to find people who wanted to talk to us. And we eventually found this partner in Kentucky, and that's how it worked out. But it's very important to do this locally. And we may eventually do it locally. I mean, the dialogue that we're doing now is local. Every month we're meeting as a mixed race group right here in the Valley. Sometimes we meet in Amherst and sometimes in Holyoke, but we are in the Valley. And we're trying to do this. And a lot of people in the small groups I know talked about racial injustice and wanting to do cross-racial groups, and maybe that's something you can do. It's, again, you've got to build it up slowly because the distrust is real and legitimate, but it is possible to build that up. So let's have more questions.
It's hard in the Valley in talking to the other group. You're saying it's hard to work in the Valley to join the other group.
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, right after the election, we wanted to focus on politics, and most people we knew in the Valley are pretty progressive, and we had trouble finding conservative people who were interested in being in dialogue with us. You know, sometimes you see articles in the Gazette from conservative people saying they don't even want to identify themselves because they feel isolated and sometimes harassed by their beliefs. So it was hard to get conservative people. We tried through some churches, we tried through some community centers in various towns around us that voted for Trump, and without success. It's difficult. People who are marginalized, whether it's by race or by voting preference or by class or whatever, don't want to say, here I am. It's too painful. So it was a struggle. So, other questions? Pass this way back.
Yes, I wonder if you could say something about how you form the questions that serve as the basis for a small group conversation.
A good question about questions. One of the things that Libby and I and others learned in Corona Center was that we have to teach each other what a good question is. That mostly we don't ask good questions. Mostly we make comments with a question mark at the end. And Olivia and I learned that we were doing this work overseas that the most typical question was, why did you start the war? Because each side blames the other side for starting the war. That's kind of a clobber more than a question. And many questions have a little dagger in them, a little bit of blame. You're not really of genuine curiosity. So when we do dialogues, we teach people three things: listening skills, speaking skills, and developing question skills. And you think, I know how to speak, I know how to listen, I know how to ask questions, but we don't. We don't have the skills in what we call active listening, attentive listening. Listening without interrupting, listening without justifying, etc. We don't necessarily have the right speaking skills, so we have to practice those things. And we practice teaching people how to ask questions. And in the work that we've been doing overseas through Karuna Center, we would often meet with each side, quote unquote, of the conflict separately and work with them all day on how to ask a good question, because after a war, people were wounded. After a racial incident, people were wounded, but they want to blame, they don't want to be nice. But when you blame, you don't get a decent answer. You get a defensive answer. So learning to develop good question is a big part of the practice in the actual dialogues. And last year we did a lot of dialogue training, and a big part of that was putting people into small groups and saying, develop a good question on a certain topic. So that you learn to ask a skillful question. It's not a yes or no answer, it doesn't have blame, and a good question takes people deeper than they've been. So how do you ask a question that's so thoughtful, so interesting, that people will go down into their own heart, their own emotions, and be able to call something up that might be new and different for them? We call dialogue having a new conversation on an old topic. So whether it's Trump or whether it's race, these are endlessly old topics, but a dialogue is a new way of approaching them. And within that, the listening, speaking, and question asking are new ways of being together in a group. That's why there's facilitators. It's very structured. It is not a free-for-all. We know how to have a free-for-all. You have it at your table a lot of times, right? You have it with your family when you're arguing about politics. It doesn't move us to a good place. So a dialogue event is structured with people who can hold the conversation and move it in a productive direction. I'm happy to also, if members of our group want to speak out too, I would appreciate that.
So I'm very curious, if racism and white supremacy is so embedded, the water we swim in, the air we breathe, how do you set up a dialogue that doesn't simply recreate racism and white supremacy? How do you know your questions aren't informed by those things?
Because I work very hard with in this case in South Carolina, dialogue with a person of color from South Carolina. And we worked together on developing questions, and I had members of the group whom I trust, and I said, what do you think about this question? Because I've got to watch myself too. I'm in part of this swimming in this water. And I have to be very careful and very conscious and check out my assumptions. We always have ground rules when we have dialogues about listening and speaking and so forth. And this group added 2 wonderful new ground rules that really helped us. If you feel hurt by something somebody said, you can say ouch. And if you feel that you said something really stupid you shouldn't have said, you can say whoops. So we have ouches and whoopses. And it's very useful because sometimes you just say something and you just wish you hadn't said that. You can say, uh-oh, whoops, can I reframe that? Or uh-oh, ouch, this hurt me. So that people can say, because I'm black, because I'm a woman, because I'm a whatever, I felt hurt by that, and explain it. So we're working on it all the time. Sandra?
I'd like you to give us an example, or 2 or 3, of questions that are particularly useful to you.
Well, there were 2 stories that came from members who were not in the group but came into the open event. Sarah, do you want to talk about this? I'd like to share this a little bit. These are important.
Paul, I think Sandra's asking not about how we dealt with a person who was making a biased comment, but you're asking like when we had the small groups. So we started very, very personally. And one time, one of the months was specifically an experience of just even call it awareness of race. As a white European American, I'm going to be coming at the question in a different way. So we tried to frame it, and so you can take the question really young, or you can say, share a salient moment for you in your life that has to do with race. And then the person self-selects, I want you to know this. So what's so great about that is it's kind of saying, I want you standing at my shoulder. There's a terrific woman, Pumla Gobodo-Madikizela from South Africa, and she says, after someone hears your story, the story changes because now there's a listener standing with you. So we were aiming for that degree of listening. So it's like your heart finds, I want you to know about this. You didn't know this. Will you stand with me there? In that way, yes, the wording is important, but a lot of it is setting up what Paul was saying about what will put us into our hearts.
So I want to bring our group up because we're going to end. So will all our group members maybe come in so we can do this together? Everybody be here. We haven't been all together yet here up front. And I'd like to end by just passing the mic around through our group for people to say what it is that they want to leave you with. What some experience, some thought, some message that each of you would like to say to the group. Here, who wants to start?
Well, I told the group that I was working with that I'm not the one to wait, I will just start. And I did that all the time down south too. What I want to leave with is what I came with, which was Nelson Mandela. And I think that an awful lot of what I see that separates us comes from being taught. And so I understand that you can be retaught, and it's much, much longer. So it takes much, much more time and much, much more effort, which I'm willing to put in.
In the small group that we just participated in, at least the one that I participated in, someone asked me something about what was transforming for me in participation in this group. At least that's how I'm sort of thinking about the question again. And I think that was an important question because I remember sitting in a group of four, a sister of African American ancestry and two other women, white women from South Carolina. And after 45 minutes, I remember expressing that I felt that I wanted to spend more time with the white women in this group. Because it wasn't so much what was said, but it was the vibration that I picked up that led me to feel that there was a huge opening that we could build something substantial on. So it's not the words that people say, but the vibration in which and from which the honesty and authenticity of those words and vibration can be felt.
So we talked about in our group about having common and shared values, and those are things that are really worth working to manifest in this community and this nation. But it's really important to keep in mind that in this community, we have our own difficult work to do, that own personal work to, divest ourselves of privilege and racism in our own communities. So to be able to appreciate those commonalities and those shared values and to work towards them, we have to do the difficult work of working on ourselves, and it takes courage. And I just ask you all to be courageous with us.
I'm thinking about the sense of building new muscles and trying to find language for it. So in terms of things that, for me, keep white supremacy in place is shame. So what shame, white fragility, oh no. So what I'm trying to learn is I'm unconscious, and suddenly I become conscious of my unconsciousness. And it's trying to not run to that protected place of shame, but stay in relationship and keep that feeling of shift from shame to vulnerability. So I'm here in the long haul. So those kinds of muscles and more language for that kind of muscle really interests me.
I would say let's not underestimate the significance of this historical moment that we're living in, that there's a lot of ways in which it's terrible, and that there are some really important ways in which there's an opportunity for that opening. I think that Rose was talking about energetically, and that it's time for us to mobilize out of our complacency so that we can seize this moment.
Oftentimes when we talk about race, we find it very uncomfortable. There are words like fragility and guilt and frustration. But stepping out of our comfort zone, for me, has become very comfortable.
So something that, one of the things that I want you all to leave with today is that I want to remind you all, or remind us all, that it's not enough to not be racist. It's super important to be anti-racist every day. The other thing, looking at this room, looking at all of us here, I'm reminded of everyone that is missing in this room, in this conversation. So there's a quote somewhere, I don't know who wrote it, but if it's not accessible to the poor, and in this case to the voiceless, it's neither radical nor revolutionary. So we have to do better.
One thing that I was thinking about a lot when we were in South Carolina, and that a question Carly just asked in my group reminded me of again, is that oftentimes people who have done some work, or people who are in very academic types of cultures where we live or what we do for work, we often approach communication and relationship and interaction with other people from a place of feeling like we know something, or feeling like we can educate, or wondering what we can share, etc. And that what is so much more valuable is to approach those interactions from a place of what can I learn from you, and how can I listen to you, and just that we've not approached other human beings automatically thinking that we have something, not that we don't have anything to offer, but that what we have, that our ideas are more important, but that we approach them by wanting to hear what they have to share with us and how we can grow from what they share with us.
I described this in my small group, this experience with Bridge for Unity, as a dream come true for me. I've been in men's groups for 30 years. I've been in cross-race dialogue groups with men. I've been in a men's book group. I've done gender work with men and women about gender. I've been longing to be able to do a group of multiracial, multi-age, multicultural people across gender lines for the last 50, 60 years. And this finally happened. And you're hearing what has been my privilege. I'm one of the 4 white male privileged guys in our group of 35. And that's a lot of stuff to shed. And finding a way to have incredible simpatico and trust with this kind of group of people has been an amazing privilege and gift. And in my small group, people were asking, how can we have this? And I'm hoping that our group can facilitate some of these dialogues within this valley where several people are pointing out there's much work to be done.
Good evening. I'm going to try this one more. Good evening. I just want you to know how nice it is to be here. And in my small group, I was sharing how the reason why I participated in this group was because many times I've chosen not to participate in dialogue groups because people weren't really ready to have deep, meaningful conversation. And so I don't waste my time. And I would say that many people who are not here right now who are here in this community, who are not at the table, might not be here because they're not sure if you are ready to have deep, meaningful conversation. And the way you can begin to have this meaningful conversation is by not hiding behind being white, right, as an identifier, right? But to look at how and who you are in terms of your ancestral lineage and why it is so safe to hide behind white and whiteness that makes it difficult to have conversation. But this group here said that they were interested, so that's why I joined this group.
Behold how good and how pleasant it is to dwell together. So I joined this group with the faith that this is God's work. It is very easy to be cynical because of your traumas or what has happened to you. It is very easy to be scared because of guilt of what you get from what has happened to others. Both of those things I was saying in my small group are sort of 2 sides of the same coin that prevent God's work from happening, which is us humanizing each other, us being able to bear a lot and still forgive those that trespass against us. To me, I don't begrudge anybody that doesn't have the level of dedication to how important it is to connect soul to soul, person to person, even past disagreements, differences in perspective. But I see the process of being able to do that as something that we want to demonstrate and want to have others replicate, because that's going to look different, and as it should. God is not finished with any of us. But the process of doing that prevents lots of the travesties, atrociousness in our history that has happened in the eons that have led up to this moment. If we can be some small measure of how to do that going forward, it is something that I'm willing to risk more cynicism, more hurt, more anguish to say I was a part of that being eliminated. And I hope that there are others within the sound of my voice and beyond that are willing to sacrifice, toil, and even hurt for that cause.
So seems like a small thing to say, go out and try to talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, talk to people you don't even know all that well. And it seems sometimes to me, but the enormity and the longevity of this, how did you say it one time, James, this hole that we're in, this hole that we've been pushed in, seems so intractable. Especially in some of my studies looking at the situation in India with the Dalit people and the caste structure. How long years? Thousands of years? 2,000. And, we're still digging out of that hole. But as we say, it's only by naming the problem and starting to work on the problem that we can make any progress on the problem. So that's what it's about, and the needs coming forward are significant for our little group. We are going to be hosting folks from Kentucky and South Carolina here, and we need places to put them up. We need food to feed them while they're here, and so there are a lot of expenses involved, and we do encourage, if you want a way to support what's happening, that's one thing we can do. We saw the little basket out there, saw a lot of change already dropped in it, that's great. If you drop any more, or if you haven't dropped yet, please consider doing it. Thank you.
And on that note, if you want to make a tax deductible contribution, you can make it out to the Trap Rock Peace Center. And that's going to be our 501c3 pass-through, so it's tax deductible. We do need considerable amounts of money to have this happen. And you can get in touch with me, and I'll tell you more about how to do that. We're ending on a sobering note, and my colleagues here had sobering things to say, and that seems right to me. This is a sobering experience. There's nothing easy about this. We're going to struggle together. And I would say struggle and together are both very important words in that. That we are in struggle. Our group, our country, our world, we're in incredible struggle. And the fact that this little group of us are in struggle together is very meaningful for me. Because we have to engage in this struggle. Racism is a 400-year-old struggle in this country. Shabazz was reminding me that the first slaves were brought in 1619 to Jamestown, so it's a 400th anniversary. No wonder we're sober about this and serious about it. So I'm very grateful to all of you for joining us in this seriousness of purpose and in raising your own consciousness as we're trying to raise ours. There's plenty to do right here in this valley. You don't need South Carolina or Kentucky. We've got plenty of toxicity right here. And reaching out, being serious with others, forming groups, dismantling racism, opposing racism, standing up where you can stand up. All of this matters. So, Sarah, I saw you had a hand up.
I was thinking that if there were people who wanted to host somebody,
well, we'll take care of that.
we could put a note with that. Like 10 minutes.
So we have a little song to end, and then we're going to say goodbye. So before the song, we all want to thank you because we didn't know we'd have such a huge, wonderful crowd, and we're grateful for it. And here's got some good musicians here, so let's end with a song.
As we began.
It's been suggested that for those of you who still have your music sheet, we do the first verse of "We're Building Up a New World," because that's what we're doing here. All right? To the tune of "We're Climbing Jacob's Ladder." We are building a new world. We are building
building up a new world